Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm here today in my kitchen to talk with you about the herbs and spices in my cupboard and what's in your cupboard. The cupboard that we have in our kitchen comes to us from Mother Earth's cupboard, and a lot of the herbs and spices that you have available to you can be useful to help keep you well, not just because of colds and flus, but also to help you with headaches, stomach problems, other digestive issues, skin health, nervous system, helping you to stay calm and happy, just looking at your wellness and all the layers. And today we're going to go through some simple ways to prepare some of these spices and herbs and food as medicine. Things that you normally would use for cooking, to season your food, often over the decades of people living on the earth, have been used for medicine, and it has just sort of worked its way into our use as food as medicine. Today we're going to talk about how to maybe be more intentionally focused on using those herbs in greater amounts to help you balance out tissue states in your body. When you're sick or have a cold of some sort, you will often have too much fluid, too much mucus, or maybe not enough. Maybe your tissues are really dried out and scratchy and burny, or maybe that's showing up in your skin. If your stomach is having trouble absorbing oils and your intestines are not processing the food properly to get the oils out to your skin. We need to think about how do we keep our mucous membranes tonified, supported, moving fluids with enough lubrication to keep everything intact and whole. That's like the skin on the outside of our body as well. Those are the two avenues that the germs and the viruses and the microbes in the world around us use to get into our body most of the time. So if we can keep the skin on the outside of our body healthy and the skin on the inside of our body healthy, we have a much better way to stay well proactively. A lot of the herbs and spices that we're going to talk about today can do just that. You should have had a handout made available to you that has a list of some of the more common ones that you're easily able to find at the store, in your area, and or grow in your garden. A lot of these herbs are easily grown in pots, and you can keep them growing even during the winter months if you have a sunny windowsill, and it's a great resource to have some fresh herbs. And it's a fun project to do with kids too. The first page of your handout talks about the general idea of the way to use and think about using herbs. It's about trying to balance the tissues in your body so that those things that are out of balance, like the too much mucus, can regulate and become more harmonious and even. So that is taking a look at what we call your constitution. If your constitution is in balance, then everything is kind of even. But most of us tend to be either a little bit on the cold side, a little bit on the hot side. Some people are more dry than others. Some people have more dampness in their body. Some people have extra wind. So what we want to do is think about what about our tissue states supports that, and if that gets out of balance, what do we need to do to bring it back to even? So for me, as a person that runs kind of innately cold, and I'm often the one with the extra sweaters on when everybody else might still be in just a long sleeve shirt, I like to have warming things. Spices like ginger and cinnamon and cardamom and things that are a little bit more warming to my body and help my circulation move feel good to me. Now, I have people in my family that are just the opposite. And when I'm in a sweater and a hat, they're still in a t-shirt. They don't do as well with warming herbs, and they actually upset or aggravate their system. It's having spicy food does not agree with their stomach so much, or it makes their fluids run too much because their body is trying to balance that out and come back to normal because there's an excess there. So when you're looking at this list of herbs and you're thinking about the state that you're in, that's what you kind of want to look to. If you look, for instance, at bay leaves. Bay leaves make a great tea for someone that has some upset stomach, indigestion. It's very calming, it's soothing, it's good to help relax tissue states, it helps to relieve gas, and that's a very nice um, mild herb that is kind of in the middle. It's broad spectrum. Most people can benefit from bay leaf in a cup of tea or added to food. Now, if you take a herb that's slightly more warming, like cinnamon, for instance, that's still going to be fairly neutral to a lot of people. It's got warming properties. Cinnamon is very antimicrobial. It's anti-inflammatory. It's got a little bit of an analgesic, which means that it can numb your tissue a little bit, and it's a little bit stimulating in that way. So that is also a herb that would warm you up a bit. It helps your circulation. It helps your cardiovascular system work better. Now, if someone is needing something even more warming, we might want to look to something like ginger. Ginger is a very warm herb. It's kind of hot on the scale, and it's very diffusive. It brings the heat out to the periphery. It stimulates, and it's very movement oriented. It's used for digestion, for calming. It helps with nausea. And because it's moving your fluids around and your circulation around, it can be used to affect muscle and joint pain out in your extremities. However, ginger might be just a little bit too much for that person that's sitting in the t-shirt. Having all that extra activity and circulation and things moving might aggravate them instead of help relieve the symptoms. And so we would maybe want to look at something that we want to keep fluids moving to get things going, but we might want to look at something that's a little bit less warming and more cooling. And we can look to things like some of the mint plants that are more stimulating but more cooling, like spearmint, for instance. That can help with all of those same things, moving fluids, helping support circulation, facilitating movement, but it's not quite that warmth that we're looking at. Other cooling herbs that we might want to think about are fennel or maybe cilantro. Those are all things that, and dill. Those are more cooling herbs. They're more soothing to someone that's got a hot tissue state, that's got an excited already situation going on in their stomach or their lower intestines. All those herbs work really good to calm an upset stomach, to help to diffuse fluids and cool systems off. So this sheet and handout is designed to help you kind of look for those highlight words and then gather more information. There's resources on the back page for you to look things up online, books and references that are some of my favorites too. And just to stimulate your interest, hopefully this is going to encourage you to look up more things and search out more ways to incorporate these herbs, not just when you need them to help with an illness or an imbalance, but just in your daily life to keep you proactively well. So let's talk about onions. So onions are full of all kinds of great trace minerals, selenium, quercetin. Garlic is a cousin of the onion, has a lot of the same properties. They're really supportive to the cardiovascular system, to just thinning secretions, helping things move, and they can be really useful if you have a lot of goopiness from a cold or sinus congestion. They're great for helping just to soothe aches and pains topically. You can make a pack with onion and mustard, and it can be helpful. There's some recipes at the end of your handout to try out some of these different things that I'm going to show you today. Some people are allergic to onions and garlic, so if you are going to share any of your remedies with someone, you might want to make sure and tell them first what's in what you're sharing, so that you know that it's going to be safe for them to use. The first thing we're going to do is make an onion and honey cough syrup. Usually you get a face when you say, I'm going to give you some onion cough syrup, but honestly, this tastes really well. It's really good, and even little children will eat this pretty readily, because the honey really does add a lot of soothing, savory quality. So what I have done here ahead of time is just chopped up some onions and put them in the bottom of the pan. And then you're just going to use enough honey to cover the layer of onion that you have. You don't need to make a big, huge batch, but it does store in the refrigerator for up to a couple of months. So this honey actually has been infused with ginger already. Well, that's going to be backwards for you, but another good medium to use for making tonics, things that are going to have a longer shelf life and that you want to use daily over a period of time, is to put things in honey. It's a really great medicine on its own. It's antimicrobial, it's antifungal, it helps with bacteria. It has all kinds of its own vitamins and nutrients, and it's a natural sweetener, which your body recognizes easily, and it can support your energy when you need a boost. It is a sweetener, so you do have to think about that in moderation as well, but it's got a lot of great, helpful healing qualities all on its own. Good raw local honey that's made from the plants that are growing in your same area, that even gives it an additional boost, because it's more like you when you buy things and get things from your area that you're also growing in. So we've got the honey, and we've measured out enough to just cover the onions. Now, if I had enough time and I was making this proactively just to be prepared, I would just let this sit on the counter with the cover. You always want to cover your things that you're making. And I would let that sit 24 hours, maybe a little longer, but what you're looking for is for the onions to be translucent, sort of see-through. Like when you might saute them in a pan, that kind of see-through look to them. That's a sign that all of the medicine has been infused into the honey. And then you're just going to use one of your useful kitchen tools. I highly recommend getting a variety of sizes of these metal sieves. They come in very handy for straining things out. You can put them on top of a measuring cup or on top of the jar you're going to pour something into. If you have something that's really has some fine particulates that you don't want in your finished product, you can put a coffee filter in there, and that strains it out nicely and makes it all easy to take out and clean and put right in the compost. So after that has sat, I would take it and I would strain it into the jar with a label and a date, and store it in my fridge. And you can take that when you need it to soothe your throat and help to calm the symptoms of a cold, even every hour, just by the spoonful. You could mix it into some hot water and sip it as tea, or just take it plain on a spoon. If you need this in a hurry, that's where the pan comes in. So in a hurry, I mean like within an hour or so. You never want to boil anything that you're making. You want to do things on a very low heat, and especially when you're doing something like with honey, because we want to preserve as much of the natural aliveness of whatever we're working with. And so just a very, very low warm, not even a simmer, and then you're going to let this just do its thing on the burner until it does get to that state of translucence. And then you're going to know that that medicine has been soaked up into the honey, and you can strain it and put it in a jar and label it just as if you had let it set overnight, and do it at a little bit slower pace. Now these onions, you could leave in and just eat them as well, because they're very good for you. But there's our nice honey, and it does get a little thin when the juice of the onion soaks in, so it does pour a little bit more easily. It's not thick like the honey you'd put on your toast. And so you could put that in a jar that is more of a pouring, like with a little tiny cap, so it's easier to manage, and that can be helpful too. Another way that we can use onions to help us get rid of germs and microbes is to just take an onion that's chopped up and leave that open container near where we're sitting. During the day by your office or the chair that you're sitting in. At night, if you don't mind the smell, when you're breathing, the microbes that you're breathing out are naturally attracted to that cut up onion. It acts like a magnet. And there's some studies out there that suggest that when people get sick of food poisoning from the buffet, and they always seem to blame it on the mayo or the eggs or something like that, they're finding that most likely it's probably from the open onions. So that might be something to be mindful of if you're out at a picnic or something and the onions have been sitting out for a while. They just naturally attract that. So it's another good use of that. These onions, after you've been using them in that application, I would not reuse in another cooking activity. Those I would just put straight into the compost. I'm going to just pause this for a second. Okay, so let's see, where were we? We're done with the onions. Let's move on to some other useful tools and things that work well when you're making infusions or teas. I really like these electric hot pots. They're quick, they're efficient, they're versatile, they're easy to clean, they don't use a lot of energy, and you can get some nice hot water in a short period of time to do things like make teas and infusions. If you're making small batches, again, using a pan on the stove to make your infusion, cooked over a very low heat, and then straining it through a strainer is an option. Having a dedicated press, French press for tea is another way if you're making a smaller batch. This works really nice. I really use this a lot, especially in the months where we're drinking more warm things, because it just keeps things nice, and it's easy to strain and not much mess. If I'm making a bigger batch of something that I would like to maybe use as a foot soak or a steam inhalant, I might go with this bigger pot. So having a variety of different sizes of pots and pans available, depending on what you're wanting to make your infusion for, you know, sort of thinking ahead, if your thinking is clear enough in the midst of your illness, is a good idea. So oftentimes you can use the same tea that you're going to make to drink, to use to breathe in as an inhaler, and also to use either as a foot soak or to dump into a bathtub or use as a compress. So making a large batch that you can sort of portion out for those different applications is lots easier, and then you don't have to fuss around as much. So let's start with some of the smaller batches. Thyme is one of your best friends when it comes to this time of year, cold and flu season, keeping your mucous membranes, especially in your respiratory tract, healthy and intact and coated with things that make you more resilient against invaders trying to come into your body. Thyme is high in the volatile oil thymol, which is one of the properties that helps us with antimicrobial actions. It makes a really tasty tea, and it just smells lovely. All of these herbs that I'm going to talk about that have high volatile oils, which is the things that give them so much aroma, like thyme and mint and oregano, they're all related in certain ways in the mint family. But the volatile oil piece, the part that makes them smell, is often the part that a lot of the medicine that we're using for these things comes from. So that's something that you can remember when you're using different herbs. Maybe you don't have thyme, but maybe you do have some oregano. You're going to get some of the same benefits. Maybe you just have peppermint, but that's still going to help with a lot of the same things that the thyme might be helping you with. So you can refer back to your list and check the properties and see where on that scale that fits in. And maybe you need to think about, well, this isn't going to loosen up my congestion quite as much, but maybe if I add a little bit, a pinch of ginger into it, then that will boost that. So it's a matter of just playing with the recipes and finding the things that will balance you. A general rule of thumb when you're using herbs is that you're going to use twice as much fresh herb as you do with a dried one. And dried spices are great. If you have from the grocery store in your cupboard some dried thyme that you were using to make spaghetti sauce one day, that is going to be just as good as this fresh thyme when you're making a tea out of it. You just have to make sure that you make it as strong as you want it to be and play with the amounts. We'll use the French press for this. So having good kitchen scissors is another quick way when you're working with herbs. You don't have to chop anything. We're just going to go ahead and put about, this is a quart, and I like to make the teas relatively strong because you can always reuse the herbs most of the time. So I'm going to put that whole little bundle right in. And again, you could do this in a pan on the stove. And we're just filling that up. And that's it. And that's going to steep with the cover on it. Remember, you always want to put a cover over to keep the medicine in the liquid. I have to reach over, and my friend Pam is a felter, and she made me a little tea cozy for my press. So it keeps it warm while it's steeping. Once that's done, you can strain it. You can sip on it all day long. You could put some of your wonderful onion honey in there, or some just of the other regular ginger honey or whatever else you have. It's very good just on its own. It's almost a little bit oily on its own, and it's really soothing to your throat. It's easy to drink. You could also use this whole pot as a way to steam and inhale. And the same thing you can do if you're not having the time or the place, or you're at work and you just need a cup of tea. You can take a minute to just breathe in that steam, and right there you have your own little mini infuser. All of these herbs in essential oil form in a diffuser can be helpful to help support the air around you. disinfect the environment, create, again, some of those ways for your body to get that medicine in. When we use essential oils, we really impact layers of our body on a deep level that can unlock and help to rebalance all of the things that we're working towards today. So it's another good layer to incorporate. When we have something that starts to feel out of balance, or an illness coming through in my household or any of my family members, we get the diffuser on, we start making teas, we put some tinctures on board, we will take out our vinegar. Maybe we've taken our apple cider vinegar and infused some tonic herbs into this. There's a recipe in your handout for hair raising cider, which is my version of fire cider, which has a lot of very activating herbs to help stimulate all your system functions and get you really moving so that your body can respond to the invaders, to the things that are out of balance, and move them back into balance more quickly. So apple cider vinegar is another way that we can make things that will have a longer shelf life, and again, has its own healing properties. Apple cider vinegar on its own is full of vitamins and minerals. It helps with your digestion. It can help your immune system. It helps people with inflammation in their joints and in the rest of their tissues. It's just got a list this long of things that are it's helpful for, including things like cleaning and disinfecting. So it's definitely a good thing to have on hand at home. Back to using teas and inhalants and infusions. Let's take a look at our time. You can see it's already starting to change color in there. But suppose I wanted a bigger pot. I wanted to make something that I could use to drink, and I was also going to want to sit with it and breathe some of it in and breathe the medicine in that way. I would maybe use something of this size if I wasn't thinking about then going one step further into the bathtub with it. And I would fill this pot up with as much water as was safe to handle. And then in this case, I would probably use maybe twice as much herb as you saw when we were making it in the teapot. This is rosemary. Rosemary is another herb that is super high in volatile oil. It's got really activating qualities. It smells lovely. It's very stimulating. It's kind of bitter. It's a little bit pungent. So it's got more of a little bit of a cooling aspect than some of the mints and basil and thyme. This plant, it really is stimulating, and it has an affinity to the circulatory system, and specifically to the circulatory system of the head and the brain. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just cut up a whole bunch of rosemary. And we're going to, so what I would do is I would have enough water in there, and then I would cover the whole top with a layer of rosemary, fairly thick. And I'm just going to use the hot pot right now. But you would fill this up, and you'd steep it again on that low, slow, with the cover on. So you make maybe 5 or 10 minutes. This is going to be a fairly strong infusion. And you're going to take enough out carefully. You strain enough for your cup or two that you're going to drink. Again, lovely, easy. You can put that herb right back in the pot. and then you'd have, this would be much darker after 5 minutes or so. You'd have your tea to drink. I'm going to put the cover back on this for a minute and let that steam build back up. And then you're going to use this to breathe in that medicine and sit with and have it surround you and infuse through your skin and coat your respiratory tract that way. Now, lots of times when people think about leaning over a pot, they'll put a little towel over their head, try and stand there. That's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and you want to be able to be comfortable and sit with this for a period of time. So I'm going to show you an easier way. So here we are again. So I've found myself a chair and a low stool. And I've got myself set comfortably so that I'm going to be able to sit here and lean. You could even have a chair with arms or move this closer to the counter so that you can lean your head on the counter as you're sitting maybe 15-20 minutes. And then the way to make this easy so you don't have to worry about juggling the towel and for safety is to use a sheet. Once you get the sheet situated over the chair and over yourself, you're going to be able to safely sit with your head over that pot, and it's going to be more comfortable, and you're going to trap a lot more of the steam in and around you. Be very careful when you take the lid off. Don't have your face over the pot. Take the lid off, set it aside, and then enjoy your steam. Another way that you could use an infusion is by creating a compress. Say you didn't want to get a foot bath or be in a tub of water, but you wanted to address a certain area, maybe with some herbs to help with inflammation, like peppermint or cayenne. Topically, they're used to help stimulate circulation, blood flow, fluid flow to sore muscles, achy joints, and it can be really helpful. So a compress is different than a poultice, and that a compress is just a cloth soaked in the liquid, whereas a poultice actually has the herbs themselves inside that wrap and are used as part of the application. And a compress is really a nice, easy way to help when someone is feverish. You can use cooling herbs, you can make your infusion cold, and you can help with, body temperature regulation. We don't ever want to keep a fever from moving through its course, but we want to facilitate it so it's helpful and not detrimental to the person. It's the same thing for if someone is too cold. You can help a person warm up. One of our temperature sensor areas, one of the main ones, is at the base of our neck and our head. So taking a compress, you can squeeze that out, and then a dry one on top for drips, and putting that behind someone's neck It can be amazingly effective. Back of the neck, on the brow, really anywhere that would feel good. You can use aromatic herbs, those ones high in volatile oils like thyme and peppermint, lavender. You could make a compress and put it here. And those herbs can help to open up those pathways without having to sit over a pot of water. So there's lots of ways to make this very easy and doable at home. Easy for people that don't have a lot of endurance for sitting through something messy. Not that it's entirely messy. You can do this in a very neat way. But there's ways to just make it comfortable for all of you. There are so many different kinds of aromatic herbs that are along the spectrum, and they're all ready to be helpers for you. So learn more about your herbs and how that they can help you to stay well and to provide flavor and variety and joy to your life. And if you have any questions, you can email me at Stacey, Stacey, at energyforlifeconnection.com, and I would be happy to communicate with you and continue sharing and learning. Thanks.